I don't stand side by side with nobody till I bleed with them first.
What did we just see? You probably think this world is a dream come true.
When I step into this ring, yeah, bro, I am addicted.
Don't sleep on Luca!
Maybe tomorrow we'll all wear 42.
If you fight for your dreams will fight for you.
If you have been following this channel for a while, you know that for close to a year now, I have been walking an album a day. I made a video commemorating the first 100 days. Recently, I hit 200 days, and for those of you hoping for a part 2, I'm sorry, but I don't think I'll be doing one. My main reason is that the last 100 days of walking were a bit odd, to say the least. There were albums I liked and really enjoyed, of course, but a lot of the times I found myself not liking the albums or just not having anything to say about them really. So really, I didn't think I would have much to say this time around and didn't want to have a video where so much of it was perhaps negative in a way. That doesn't mean I didn't have albums that I enjoyed. In fact, on your screen now is a list of albums that I really enjoyed in the past 100 days of walking, with some that made their appearance in the 2023 recap video. However, I bring all of this up because for the next 100 days I wanted change and I sort of wanted a challenge. Thus, I came up with the following. For the next 100 days of walking, I will be selecting an artist and walking to their discography. Each day I will go in chronological order and listen to an album of theirs. I'm not allowed to move on to a new artist until I've listened to every album in said artist's discography. Whether it's my first time listening or re-listening to them, this is the new challenge I have put in place for myself for the next 100 days. As you see from the title and the thumbnail, our first artist up to bat is none other than North Carolina rapper J. Cole. Alright, so before we get into this, there is a lot that I need to get out of the way first. First off, why did I choose J. Cole to start off the challenge? The answer to that is pretty simple. J. Cole is what I would call a polarizing artist to me. Growing up, I didn't like J. Cole and his music. I decided to start with J. Cole in order to give him a true and fair assessment. See, before now, I had never listened to a J. Cole album. I had heard a couple songs, but that was it. My reason for this was because J. Cole really started to get big when I was in middle school. Yes, that is very telling of my age. Sorry for making some of you feel old. Being the music nerd that I am, I was interested by the sheer number of people talking about him. All anybody in my middle school could talk about was two artists, J. Cole and Logic. So one day, I asked one of my friends, what was a song that they would recommend from J. Cole? Since 2014 Forest Hill Drive had just come out and was popping, they recommended Wet Dreams. This friend clearly didn't understand who I was, the type of music I listen to, what I look for in music. Still, I said, you know what, let me give it a shot, because as you know from me, I will give all music a shot. I'm here to explore all different sorts of genres, all different sorts of artists. So I said, you know, let's give it a shot. Maybe the title's just, you know, whatever. Gave it a shot. Did not like the song at all. However, I was persistent. I was like, this many people are talking about him. He has to be good, you know. Maybe this is just a bad first listen, you know. So I began to ask more people for song recommendations, hoping to get more songs to see the hype behind the man. Tell me why every single person I asked recommended the same song. And for years, people wondered why I didn't like J. Cole. You would think this man only had one song according to these people. It took until high school for a girl I knew to actually recommend other songs. One of the recommended songs was Crooked Smile featuring TLC. I really enjoyed that one. The others that she suggested, not so much. And from that point on, I just said to myself, maybe he isn't for me. And I moved on. Even as he grew more and more, as people talked about all his different albums that were coming out, I just moved on, never bothered to give his music a listen. And I know many of you will hear this and be like, that isn't a fair assessment of an artist because you had one bad experience, you know, and I agree with you. And that's why we're here today. Obviously, an experience in middle school shouldn't keep me from fairly assessing an artist. However, it is a lesson in how one bad experience can turn somebody away for years. But J. Cole was the first artist of selection for this very reason. And because my best friend is a fan of his music and I felt I owed him this as a sort of, you know, gift in a way, you know, to be able to give J. Cole a proper shot for him, because I know he enjoys his music. So my goal for this was simple: be as open-minded as possible. I have heard a lot of criticisms that have been thrown J. Cole's way, such as corny, boring, you know, stuff like that. I've heard a lot about the subject matters of the stuff he talks about and this and that, and I had those in mind, but really I just wanted to see if I agreed with those takes, but also just, you know, wanted to go in with an open mind and not hold that against him, and go in with that sort of mindset that that's the music I should come to expect from him. And the final disclaimer: as you know, I try to be as positive as I can on this channel, when especially it pertains to wrestling and music. I try to focus on things I enjoy, but obviously with a series like this, negatives will be talked about. I'll try my best to keep it at a minimum, but it's simple. If I don't like it, I don't like it. It's just my opinion at the end of the day, and it really should not hold any value to your personal enjoyment of the things. With that said, let's get right into it and start with The Come Up by J. Cole. Is J. Cole's debut mixtape from 2007. Just look at this album cover. If that doesn't say 2000s to you, I don't know what does. The Come Up is a 21 track album that comes in at over an hour long. Bring this up for my main criticism: it's too dang long, man. I know throughout the history of this channel I have probably come across as a huge hater of long albums, and look, I promise you it's not TikTok brain rot. I do have the attention span for long albums, but half the time these albums suffer from their length. Songs begin to blend into one another and become difficult to differentiate. This results in many songs coming off as filler, even when they provide some good substance. But that's overall how I felt about The Come Up and even a later album. From one standpoint, I get it. J. Cole was a young artist trying his best to get attention on his name. He likely wanted to come out with a bunch of songs so that from the start people would have more to work with and get an understanding of who he is as an artist. However, more isn't always better. As you often hear, quality is better than quantity. Along with this, at times the sound and lyrics of this album can feel a bit dated at times. It is definitely reflective of his age at the time, and I think that's, you know, something to love from this record. He's just a young man with a dream, with years of growth and improvement still ahead of him. Overall, not a record I enjoyed, with not a whole lot to say about it. Changing our tune a bit, The Warm Up is a record I enjoyed a lot more than The Come Up. Still clocks in at way too long, with 22 tracks and nearly being 70 minutes long. However, in the 2-year gap with The Warm Up coming out in 2009, this record really felt like a step up for Cole. He really improved a lot for me. I enjoyed the sound of this one more, with better beats in my opinion. The flow and cadence he took were a lot better and improved. Lyrically, he started to improve, and you could really see these pieces start coming together for him. Still needs to improve on the length of the albums, of course, but that's just my personal opinion. But he was getting there, you know. And if I could offer a small, like, little bit of humorous nitpick, can he stop yapping on some of these songs? I'm trying to walk to these albums, obviously, and they're long enough as is. I don't need to hear him yapping on the track, you know. It's one thing if you're actually rapping and saying stuff, but sometimes he would close the track with him just talking. Like, I think there was one song on this album where the last 4 minutes of it were just him talking, you know. But jokes aside, I felt this record was stronger than his last, and that's a good sign. Unfortunately, with these mixtapes, I can't really name you off specific tracks I enjoyed, since, you know, they're not on streaming services. I can't add them directly to my playlist. A lot of times I was listening to them on like YouTube, and, you know, couldn't really save the tracks, you know, so I can't really name off specific tracks to you, but still, The Warm Up is definitely my favorite of the mixtape trilogy. That last line spoils this section a bit, but Friday Night Lights is the 2010 mixtape from Cole. Again, 20 songs, this time nearly 78 hours, imagine, 78 minutes long. It's like, you know, he just was trying to make these longer as he went on, you know. These mixtapes are like an Avengers movie at this point. But focusing on the music itself, I personally felt this one was a bit of a step back. It's still better than The Come Up, but I feel it's slightly a bit lower than The Warm Up for me. It felt like it was lacking a bit. The lyrics are still there. I know that's something I haven't mentioned enough. He has some good bars on this record and definitely has some meaningful songs, but this one just didn't hit me like with The Warm Up. Again, I know it feels I'm being short with these specific sections, but again, I wasn't able to write down certain songs and didn't really think to do it at the time, you know. I'll let you know right now, because obviously I walked these ones previously in the previous time before this video came out, and I'm in the middle of doing the next artist. I'm already trying to improve by taking notes during the album. Even if I'm walking, I try my best to take notes, my best to look at the lyrics, hopefully give you some that stand out, you know. But just off of what I remember, this one didn't hit like the previous record, but I am trying to improve on this little section. Speaking of records not hitting, we have Cole World, The Sideline Story. This record was J. Cole's debut record, and finally, after years of mixtapes, he finally releases his debut album in 2011, standing at 16 songs and about 58 minutes long. While I didn't know much about J. Cole before any of this, the one story that I did know about was his story with Nas, and more specifically, Nas being disappointed in him for making songs for the radio. We'll come to learn more about this story later, but basically, Nas was enjoying a lot of what Cole had to say and offer in his early years, but felt disappointed come debut album time, you know, because if you can word it in a way, Cole essentially chose to bow to the powers that be and go for radio hits rather than remaining true to the style that he was trying to push. This is seen in what was one of Cole's biggest songs, Workout. The issue wasn't chasing for your songs to be on the radio, it was what was being chosen to be on the radio. Rather than one of his more soulful or impactful songs being chosen, it's a type of like pop rap love song in a way. In Cole's eyes, he had to wait so long to finally debut, so he was willing to make this sacrifice, but in the eyes of the others, you just kind of look at it as him falling in line with the rest. And really, that's how I feel about this record as well. While I may not have enjoyed like 2 of the mixtapes as much as one of them, Cole was clearly carving out a path for himself, you know, a path where he could create hard-hitting rap records but also leave room for songs with more meaning. And, you know, he was still creating a sound that was enjoyable, and, you know, he was having songs, like I said, with meaning, where it wasn't necessarily about the bars but maybe about a specific topic like loss or single mothers. He had something unique to his name, and for his debut he kind of just let the label strip all of that away from him. I know some people can still find ways to appreciate this record, and again, there's nothing wrong with chasing hits, but it personally wasn't for me. Once again, it felt like a step down in quality. I can still enjoy some songs, like obviously Workout is going to be the hit that it is. I enjoyed Sideline Story, but songs like Mr. Nice Watch with Jay-Z make me all but agree with Nas's perspective. But at the same time, you know, I understand Cole likely had his own reasons. Like we said, he finally gets to debut. He'd been waiting years for this. He had been working his whole life for this. So I can understand him having his own reasons. And, you know, for the grand story of J. Cole, this is obviously still a necessary listen, especially, you know, because the label didn't fully dim his light on this record. There's still a couple of songs on here worth checking out. Again, there isn't anything wrong with chasing radio play and success. To me, it's just this sort of style on this album just isn't J. Cole to me. In 2013, J. Cole would release Born Sinner, a 16-song, hour-long record. Now, this one is still very similar to Sideline Story, but it was here you started noticing that shift. You still get those radio hit type of songs, such as Crooked Smile and Power Trip, but you see him start to refocus on the more reflective side of music. We get songs like Let Nas Down, where he tells the story of Nas's comments and how they affected him. You get songs like Forbidden Fruit with Kendrick Lamar and Chaining Day, the latter of which sees Cole reflect on how wealth changes people and examines how chains can represent being a slave to greed. One of my longtime criticisms of Cole was sometimes that things seemed out of place. For example, Crooked Smile. The third verse always threw me off whenever I would listen to it. The song as a whole sort of preaches this sort of self-love mentality, telling people to love themselves despite their perceived imperfections. And then in the third verse, he starts talking about things like issues in the country. For a while, I thought it was out of place, especially because in that short third verse, I felt it was something that could be expanded on in its own song, you know, like it felt out of place here and felt like it really should have been its own song. However, what I've come to appreciate from little things like this is the sort of meaning behind it. First off, the stuff talked about in this short little verse still applies to the overall theme. The first 2/3 of the song come off like a love song, but that isn't the meaning. The meaning is about self-love. What once looked out of place to me now makes sense when you look at the context of the song's meaning. Why would certain people not love features of themselves like crooked teeth? Well, it is like Cole says in the third verse, we don't look nothing like the people on the screen, you know, the movie stars, picture perfect beauty queens. Cole himself brings up his own insecurities, calling into question whether his success would be greater if his skin was pale like Eminem or Adele. Now, the main thing Cole is calling into question there is obviously racial bias, but I think it's also a bit of an allusion in a sense to what would come later in his career, really, and that was the fact of stuff like fashion and appearance. You know, in the later stages of his career, Cole sort of chose to distance himself from the typical celebrity image, less extravagant looks, and some people heralded him for it, calling attention to his humble nature and not needing excessive jewelry or expensive clothes. But in reality, the guy was just being a normal human being. I'm finding it difficult to really put into words, but basically he was saying that you shouldn't view status and essentially equate it to looks and appearance, and at the same time you also shouldn't really shame others for their stylistic choices in a way. Like, what he simply wants is for people to realize that their value comes from themselves and no amount of wealth can change that. People aren't wrong for wearing what they wear. He just wants to make sure it's for the right reasons. There's a difference between wearing something because you like it and it makes you feel comfortable and confident, and wearing something or looking a certain way because you believe it will make others think better of you. The latter creates a false sense of reality and prevents one from truly loving yourself. I hope all of that makes sense and doesn't come off as nonsense. And again, sorry for spending so much time on one song from this record, but I hope it gives you a preview of the type of guy I am when it comes to music. Give me the right song and I might just yap your ear off with line by line analysis. Returning to my main point though, I liked how he started to incorporate more meanings into these songs, especially if he knew that if he was going to have to write hits, he was going to at least find a way to include some type of message along the way. "2014 Forest Hill Drive" was J. Cole's third album, coming in 2014 obviously. I finally got my wish with this record, coming in at 13 songs and just a little over an hour, but definitely shorter song wise, you know, and it's only a little over an hour mainly due to the 14-minute song at the end of the album. I say song in quotations because again, it's him talking for most of it. But focusing on the actual album and record, this is one of J. Cole's biggest records to date. However, this album as a whole really feels to me like it's one you gotta examine maybe a bit more, because a lot of it comes off as, you know, like maybe there's underlying meanings in these songs. I know it seems a bit odd after having a lot to say about Born Sinner, but I don't really have a lot to say about this album because a lot of it didn't stick out to me, especially like lyrically. And again, I could be misreading or misremembering, but at the time of walking it just didn't stick out that much to me. And like I said, it's one of his biggest records to date. That's obviously because of the hits. The main sort of feeling I have about this is that this album is just fun, you know, and I think that's what a lot of people associate it with, especially the nostalgia they get from this record. Like I said, for a lot of people, especially in my age group, this came out during middle school, so they probably have a lot of like nostalgia for this record because of the hits and how fun this record was for them. And to me, you know, there isn't anything wrong with that. It's a fun listen with hits, and you got some good songs with good messages like Love Yours and 03 Adolescence. I have some other thoughts, but it feels weird to, like, I don't really want to voice them because I don't think they're fleshed out enough to me, you know? Like, for example, you know, a song like Wet Dreams to me seems kind of counterproductive to some of the messages J. Cole speaks about throughout his career. But again, I don't feel I have a really fleshed out argument to like really go into detail about what I think about that, you know? Like, I think I need a bit more time listening to his discography more, you know? Because don't forget, I'm walking these a day. I'm usually only giving them one listen, you know. Now that's not true to my whole album listening process with regular albums, but when it comes to this walking album a day thing, in the moment I'm only walking them and I'm only listening to them once, you know. So like I said, there could be things I'm misreading, misexamining, misremembering, you know, but as a whole, you know, it's just a fun record. I don't think some of the songs or like lines kind of hit as intended, but again, I don't know, I just don't really feel like I have enough to say about this other than just it's a fun album. For Your Eyes Only was the 2016 release from J. Cole. The record is 10 songs and about 45 minutes in length. This is one of Cole's most introspective albums, and it should be no surprise it is my favorite of his. The range he explores on this album is one that was previewed on Born Sinner and one that I have been searching for throughout his entire discography. And I guess it is here that I will admit to having a sort of unfair sort of perspective. See, for a good chunk of their careers, Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole have been compared endlessly. Now, I'm not one who really likes comparisons. I think you should really just focus on, artists and, examining them in the scope of their own careers. Comparisons don't really get you nowhere but arguments, and a lot of times comparisons are only really used to uplift someone else, and it's like, is it truly uplifting someone if you have to put someone down to uplift them? That's just the way I feel. But going back to it, they've been compared their careers, and this all stems from both men being prevalent voices for social issues, especially for the African American community. These comparisons are partly the reason why I've been searching for that deeper level with J. Cole's albums, especially when it comes to introspection. Hearing the works of Kendrick Lamar, I wanted to hear the perspectives that Cole had to offer, especially on various issues. I wanted to hear how certain things affected him and what were his stances on certain issues. But a lot of the times it felt like I wasn't getting that, and maybe that's, like I said, an unfair sort of perspective to have, because maybe what others built up Cole to be, maybe that's not what he wanted to be. Maybe that's not what, some of his music is about, or not every album has to be that way, for example, and make no mistake, I'm not saying Kendrick is perfect either. I mean, come on, we remember Kendrick Lamar's phase of hopping on Maroon 5 and Taylor Swift records, but you look at records like Good Kid, Mad City and To Pimp a Butterfly, you look at the peaks of Damn and Mr. Morale, the Big Steppers, because that's who I'm comparing Cole to at this point. That's what I'm looking for, is those records, those peaks of other records that maybe, like Cole, were more towards radio play and hits, obviously like Damn, but still has some level of introspection on it, on different topics, different subject matter. And again, it's not to say that Cole doesn't get to those levels, because this record I think is the closest it gets really, because this is the record to me that J. Cole kind of truly stepped back and said, let me tell you what I think on certain things. Let me tell you about what my life is like at times, and I remember during the time, all I heard from people when it came to this album was saying, oh, it was a good record, but it felt a bit boring. I couldn't disagree more. Slower songs don't really equal boring, and to me, Cole had a lot to say on this album. He talked about a lot of prevalent issues in the African American community, but again, like I said, he talked about himself as well. He talks about mental issues, he talks about discrimination, he talks about violence, he talks about being a father. I love the closing track of this album because it demonstrates that introspection. Serving as a message to his child, he reflects on the various issues and points of his life. He reflects on the fear that he might die before getting to teach his child and tell his child this story himself. So he's making this song as a sort of backup plan. I love a song like Change with this sort of message of like a plea to God to just understand the reasons behind why somebody might fall and make the mistakes that they do. Again, I went into J. Cole's discography with an open mind, especially because I'm a guy who prides myself on variety. So I don't think I hate some of the other albums and their sound, don't get it wrong, guys. It's not like I hate them. It's just, even if like I said before, even if I didn't mention them explicitly, there are still songs that I can rock with on all those different records. But the songs I'm choosing to mention to you throughout this are the ones that really pertain to the sound or standard that I'm looking for, just that I really enjoyed. For this record, Immortal, Ville Mentality, Change, and For Your Eyes Only are the songs that I just really enjoyed off this record. And the album as a whole, I really enjoyed and loved for its introspection, and just wish to have seen more of this on previous records, to see this level of connection that this one had with me. I would have loved to see that with the previous records that we just covered. Once again, not every album has to be like this one, there's variety in music for a reason. This is just a style that I really came to enjoy from J. Cole himself. Before anyone says it, I do this type of thing in all my videos because the internet is not an understanding place, They take all that you say personally without ever stopping to think that other people have different views. I obviously welcome discussions around my takes, and I'm always open to corrections and alternate takes, especially if there's something that I'm just blatantly getting wrong, like I say accidentally, it's like something that isn't true. mini rant over. You know, I have to go into this defense mode because, like I said, the internet is not an understanding place, but I could just hope you can come to an understanding of why I really enjoyed this record compared to others. And with that, on to the next album. All that defending I did for myself just to likely start a fire here. KOD is the 2018 release from J. Cole, standing at 12 songs, 42 minutes long. I don't know what the general consensus is around this album, but I personally did not enjoy it. To me, this is J. Cole's least inspired work despite the message behind it. To me, this is the album that comes off as boring, especially sound-wise, and the way I feel sucks because I was just talking about Cole's ability to speak on topics like this. Cole chose to focus this album around an issue that was very relevant not only in 2018 but the coming years too. I mean, just look at all the lives we've lost to drugs in the past couple of years, you know, and yet the various flows he had on here, the creative direction he took on certain record or certain points on this record just worked the best to me. I know some people interpreted certain songs as satire, like mocking the sort of aesthetic that was being pushed around. A part of me feels like that might not be the best way to try and approach change, but I also see it as sort of being a tough love type of ordeal, like having a big name in music, especially in the rap scene, to sort of come on this record and kind of show different artists how ridiculous they sound trying to promote the messages they were at the time, you know, just sort of that thing. But overall, despite, you know, the meaning behind it, as a whole, I just kind of left feeling disappointed with this album's sound and direction. Finally, our journey finishes with day 209 with the 2021 release, The Off Season. While I have been a bit critical of J. Cole's sort of lighter side of music, that doesn't mean I don't enjoy the works. This album definitely felt like a refined version of the warm-up and really his mixtape era as a whole. This entire record kind of was just demonstrating that confidence side of him, a lot more focus on bars and flow. One thing I haven't mentioned in this entire video is features. Cole has a really good ear for features, carefully selecting his collaborations and their placements on songs. It still isn't the greatest record to me, but it was a fun record and easy to listen to, and definitely one of my favorites from him. I know for some of these albums, I didn't really have a whole lot to say as I finished writing for this video. I also don't like how negative I was at times, but that's one of the main reasons I challenged myself to do this. Not everything's going to be perfect. I'm not always going to agree with the consensus, but really what I hope this series will teach me to do is become comfortable with voicing my dislikes in a way. A lot of times I'll play it safe and, I obviously keep the negativity to a minimum, and I'll just say something simple like it just wasn't for me, but I want to get comfortable with kind of digging into that and explaining why I didn't like something, or just fully, like, kind of more closely elaborating on my opinions, whether it's something positive or negative, without thinking about how someone else might feel. I still try my best to focus on the positives, but if I don't like something, I gotta let it be known, and we saw that here. There was a lot from J. Cole that I liked and didn't like. Maybe I could have done a better job going into better detail, but much like anything else, I'll get better as time goes on. Similarly, just because these are my opinions now doesn't mean they're going to be like this forever. Countless times I've listened to something, I've watched something, didn't like it on first try, only to come back later on in life and come to enjoy it. So who knows? Whether it's months or years down the line, I may come to enjoy some of these records more or less. As it stands, my current ranking for J. Cole's discography after my first listen through goes as following: KOD At Last, Cole World The Sideline Story, The Come Up, Friday Night Lights, 2014 Forest Hill Drive, The Warm Up, The Off Season, Born Sinner, and For Your Eyes Only coming in at first. It was a roller coaster of a discography, but I'm glad to have given J. Cole a fair shot and found some new songs for my playlist. With the upcoming release of their 6th studio album, tune into the next video where I will walk and review MGMT's discography.